Hey there, Jim Fortin here, salespsychologyacademy.com, and welcome to the Identity Code program. As you see there at the bottom of your screen, it says your identity is your destiny. In this program, you're going to learn and you're going to discover the ways that your subconscious identity drives you, it shows up in your life, and you will actually create in your life based upon what your identity is. And at the bottom of the image there, it says your identity is your destiny. What I want you to really get is that your self image, your identity controls your life. No matter what you, left brain analytically, might think that you want in life, and I'll show you more of this in just a little bit, no matter what you think you might want, it doesn't matter. What you will get in your life is what your self image and your identity is and are. So, whatever identity you hold at the unconscious level, that will happen for you automatically. Now, that being said, there's a picture of a girl sitting there with a box over her head. Most of us in life actually have a box around us. It's an invisible glass ceiling. We have it around us, and we don't even know that we are actually bound by this box over our head or the glass ceiling. And that glass ceiling, you, me, all of us have, that glass ceiling is our subconscious identity. What I want to show you here is that most people actually work backwards. On the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see the words have, do, be. This is how most people actually operate in the world, and as you're about to discover, it is backwards. Now, what I mean by that is most people say, you know what, if I have or I had more, then I could do more. And if I could do more, I could be more. Now, let me give you an example. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I work specifically, obviously, with entrepreneurs and selling professionals. And many times entrepreneurs will say, let's take a real estate agent, for example. They will say, if I had more money, then I could actually buy Facebook ad training. So if I had more money, then I could buy Facebook ad training. And if I could buy Facebook ad training, then I would be a very successful agent. Many times people will say things like, you know what, if I had more time, then I could do more prospecting. And then if I did more prospecting, I would be more successful. So most people work from this model, and I want you to look at your own life. Is this how you're working? Which is, if I had more, then I could do more, and then I could be more. That is backwards, and this is why most people never actually get to where they want to be. You see, this is a trap for most people because if you don't have something in the first place, what makes you think you're going to have it tomorrow or the day after? See, you don't have things in your life because you're not being the kind of person to have the things that you want. And then obviously you can see here that it's a faulty performance model. The model that you want to start working with is the reverse, and it's what's called be, do, have. And see, who you're being comes from your identity. So let's say, for example, that you are poor and that's who you're being. Then at the identity level, you are a poor person and that's how you see yourself unconsciously. But this is how you have to start working from. Who do I have to be to do the things that I want to do or need to do to have the things that I want to have? So, in your business, whether it be sales or entrepreneurship or whatever, who do you have to be and how do you have to be? And what are ways of being that will actually help you become very successful? When people want to create things, what most people do is they start externally. Let's say, for example, that a person wants to increase their sales. They or grow their business. They will start saying, okay, this is what I want and this is my goal. I want to create a business and I want to make $500,000 a year. Notice that they're looking outside of themselves. What most people never do, and what you're learning here, what most people never do is say, you know, who do I have to be and how do I have to do the things that I need to do so that I can have $100,000 a year in income? Ways of being, what are they? These are things you almost never hear people talk about. But ways of being, for example, you actually can be committed or not committed. You can be self-disciplined or not self-disciplined. You can be self-integral or not self-integral. You can be driven or not driven. And the list can go on and on. But until you start being what you need to be and how you need to be, which again all comes from the identity level, until you start being the kind of person that you need to be to do the things that you need to do to have the things you want to have, you will never have the things that you want to have. So the big question is what is my identity? And what is an identity? An identity is the fact of being who or what a person is. And it can be almost anything. I mean, it can be an angry person or a committed person or a loving person or a self-disciplined person. There are 1,000 different ways that we can be as a human being. Notice also, you probably have heard people say before that we're human beings, not human doings. So you probably have done this yourself, is that many people actually try to do their way to what they want to create. And then when people actually approach the world in this way, is they'll put out a lot of effort and they'll do and they'll do and they'll do, and they'll never get the results that they want because they're not being the kind of person to have the outcome that they or that you want. Now, I'm going to hammer that point home. For whatever outcome that you want to create in life, whether it's homes or cars or businesses or jets or mansions or whatever it is, or $1 million in the bank, you must first be the kind of person and have the characteristics to do what you need to do to have what you want. Because again, if you don't, you will fail. And you probably have experienced that in your own life. How many times have you said, you know what, I'm going to create this massive goal? And a year later, you're pretty much in the same place. Why? Because you're not the kind of person internally to actually have whatever it is you want with your goal. What you must now understand is that everything you do or do not do is an identity reflection. Now, what I mean by that, let's say, for example, you might have heard me say before, is I didn't smoke any cigarettes today, which is doing. It's a doing behavior, meaning I didn't go to the store, I didn't buy any cigarettes, I didn't smoke any cigarettes. Why? Because at the unconscious identity level, in my self-image, I am a non-smoker. So if you actually did the behavior of smoking today, then obviously at the self-image level, identity level, you're a smoker. And if you didn't smoke today, then at the identity level, you are a non-smoker. Now, hopefully this illustrates this big takeaway that I want you to get, is that you can only do what you are. And if you are a smoker, you will do the behavior, and it's very hard to do what you are not. So for example, I am not a smoker, and you may not be a smoker. And if you're not a smoker, then it's very hard for you to do that behavior because you are not that at the identity subconscious level. And the same thing applies to your life and your business. If you are not wealthy in your identity and in your mind first, it's going to be very difficult for you to be wealthy in your external environment, meaning in your bank account. If you are not in your identity a healthy person, it's going to be very hard for you to maintain everything that you need to do to be healthy in your body and in what I call your external world and your external environment. Please let that soak in, is that everything that you do in life and your life right now is a reflection of your subconscious identity. And no matter how much you wish and you hope and you pray, which I'll show you in just a little bit, for something different, whatever you're wanting different, if that's not consistent with your identity, you will not be able to achieve it. The biggest mistake that most people make is they listen to the motivational speakers, and the motivational speakers will say, you've got to set your goals for the year. So what people will do, and you might have done this yourself, you sit down, you write out all your goals, you get all excited, you get all diligent about it, and a year later you find that you're nowhere even close to those goals. Why? Because people will set goals for things, and because they are not yet the kind of person to achieve or acquire those things, they'll never get there. So they're setting goals because the left-hand side of the brain, the analytical part of the brain, says, I want that. I want the home and the car and the $1 million. But the subconscious identity says, no, 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 you're not a millionaire. So then what happens is the left-hand side of the brain says, I want the money, I want the money, I want the money. The right-hand side of the brain, the seat of the unconscious mind, says, nope, you are poor in your mind because you grew up poor. Then what happens is the identity will always win because it will direct what you will and will not do in terms of your behavior. So again, I'm driving this point home. I want you to get is it doesn't matter what you think you want in life. The biggest mistake that most people make is they listen to the motivational speakers. Here on this slide, it says, what is transformation? What most people try to do in life is they try to actually do what I call a little more, a little better, and a little different. And they say, you know what, I'm going to create a little more in life this year, and obviously a little better and a little different. That's not transformation. That's not transforming your life. Transforming your life is completely like up in the self-hypnosis program on this website, transformation is completely changing who you are from the inside out. What most people actually do not do is they don't do that. What they try to do is, kind of dabble with a little more, a little better, a little different, and then they wonder why each and every year they have a little bit better year than last year, but they never knock it out of the park. Now, you might have seen this on one of the other programs. Actually, I'm pretty sure that you probably have, but why most people never create transformation. Okay, so if you look at this graph in front of you, this is called a logical level. And this is the way that we work. We're like an onion. We work from the inside out. And what most people do when they want to create something new in life is they try to change their behavior. So let's say, for example, New Year's rolls around and people say, you know what? I want to get in shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my behavior. I'm going to start going to the gym and I'm going to start eating right. So what they're trying to do is trying to change their physical behavior to get the outcome they want in their environment. However, if you look down at the bottom of the pyramid, everything comes from our identity, which is who we are subconsciously. This is who we've learned to become. Now, you might want to go back over to the self-hypnosis program and watch that again to refresh how we become who we are, which we'll also touch on a little bit here in a different way than in the self-hypnosis program. So we create our identities. Then what we do after that is we start having stories about our identities. So let's say, for example, that you were born into a strict Catholic family. Well, what would happen is you would actually have the identity of being Catholic, and then you would tell yourself stories about what the religion meant to you. And that applies to any religion, and it also applies to socioeconomics and what's actually possible for you or not possible for you in your life. And we're going to look heavily at stories in this program. So then what you do is you tell yourself stories over and over and over, and they're nothing more than mental constructs. They're simply stories. And then these stories actually reinforce your beliefs about, let's say, for example, that you're a devout Catholic. Well, then you're going to tell yourself stories about that. You're going to create beliefs about that. And that's going to trickle into basically things that you do, which falls in the capabilities category. That'll matriculate into your behavior, which may be going to church or whatever it is that you do. And that's your life, which is your environment. You have to get, and I know you've seen this in other programs, you have to get that we work from the inside out. And the foundation of your entire life, as I'll show you in just a bit, is your identity. And I'm going to be repetitive in this program because repetition is the mother of all learning. No matter what you think you want to do to create what you want in life, if it's not consistent with your identity, again, you will never have it. Your identity is your story of your self-image. And as I said a little bit earlier, it's easy to do what you are and hard to do what you're not. Let me tie this into business. Let's say, for example, that you're really wanting to grow your business, whether you're an entrepreneur or a selling professional, and you say something like, okay, I've got a lead generator, build my funnels, or I've got a prospect, or whatever it is, and you find yourself not doing that. Well, let's go back to be to have. What is happening here is that you're not being and having the characteristics to do those things to get you the outcome that you want in business, which is what I said a little bit earlier. So if in your mind, let's say, for example, that you are not a disciplined person. Okay, so no matter how much you try to build your business using discipline, it's going to be very hard for you because why? Because you're not a disciplined person in your life. This is why understanding be, do, have is so important to you. So before you can do, which is where everybody starts, before you can do anything to grow your business, anything with sustainability, that is, and meaning something that you do with discipline over and over and consistently to grow your business, before you can do anything with consistency, you first have to be that characteristic. And even if you do not yet have it, you can actually build the characteristic, go back up to the habit program and the program on subconscious reprogramming and start programming yourself with that characteristic. Alrighty, so how is your identity created? So what happens in life is we have experiences. So the second you pop out of the womb, now maybe not the exact second, but literally the first year of your life, even if you don't know it, you're actually like a video camera and an audio recording, and you're picking up the world and you're experiencing the world. Then what you do as you start getting older is you have experiences and you start actually having interpretations about these experiences. So let's say, for example, that you're a small kid, 3, 4, 5 years old, and let's say your father screams at you all the time. Maybe you have an angry father. Well, what happens is you create interpretations about what that means. And that interpretation could be, for example, I'm a bad person. I'm not worthy. I can't do anything right. Or I'm always yelled at because I'm bad or whatever. All right, so what happens is the experience happens, you create interpretations, and then you create beliefs about those interpretations. Then what you do, what we all do, is you create stories out of the beliefs, and the stories become the identity, and it becomes like the infinity loop. It just actually, the story fuels the identity, and the identity fuels the story. And whatever stories that you've learned, you tell over and over and over and over again, and that becomes your identity. And because that's your identity, that becomes your story. And again, it's the infinity loop, and it's just over and over and over. This is why you actually pretty much don't change your life, and it's so hard to change. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in this program. Is why? Because your stories are fueling your identity, and your identity fuels the stories. They're hand in hand, and they keep you trapped. Here on this slide, at the top of the slide, it says your identity is doctrinated. Now, you've heard me say this over on another program. Actually, I believe it's in the subconscious reprogramming program. But you look at that little boy right there, in front of the picture. That little boy really, I guess he's not any older than 5 years old. And as you've heard me say before on the other program, this kid, I'm guessing because this is what we learn to do as kids, this kid is saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Do you think this kid knows what the Pledge of Allegiance means? Do you think he even knows what allegiance means? So, as a small child, he is quite literally being brainwashed and indoctrinated. Now, as he gets older, he's never going to say, you know what, I was indoctrinated as a 5 year old. You know what, first and foremost, I was born a human being. But you know what, once the humans got a hold of me, they indoctrinated me with nationalism and religion and politics and everything else. Now, I am all those things that I learned, and I was actually indoctrinated with those things. Well, the same thing applies to you. You were indoctrinated with pretty much everything you believe, and everything you believe actually plays out in your life, and everything you have in your life right now is a reflection of your unconscious beliefs, and you learned every bit of it. So, again, the point here is I'm asking you watching and listening right now, what were you indoctrinated with? If your parents were Catholic, you're probably Catholic. If your parents were Jewish, you're probably Jewish. If your parents were probably non-denominational, you were non-denominational, or a Democrat or a Republican, or an angry person because your father's angry and you learned to be angry. Whatever you are today, make no mistake about it, you have been indoctrinated to be that person. So a question I have for you again in a different way is, what was indoctrinated into you? You know, on the picture here, you see this is from the 2010 movie, The King's Speech. If you've never seen it, I think it was Movie of the Year, and in my opinion, in my interpretation, it's a phenomenal movie and one of my favorite movies. So on the left-hand side there, you see his nickname is Bertie. Here he was the prince, son of the king, and later he went on to become, I believe, King George VI. I always get those mixed up, all the titles, but King George VI. And Bertie, his speech therapist on the right, they became friends. This is the true story. And before Bertie became king, Lionel, the guy over on the right, said, you know what? You don't have to be afraid of the things that you were afraid of when you were 6. I believe he said 6, might have been 10. But that applies to you as well. What you were afraid of when you were 6 and 8 and 10, those things served you at that time, but they no longer served you. And you know what? If you look at your life now, you'll probably find yourself playing things out that you were afraid of when you were a kid, maybe being judged or criticized or laughed at or, castigated or whatever. You will probably find yourself today being afraid of the things that you were afraid of when you were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 years old. But the point of me bringing this up is what served you then no longer serves you. I need to go into this story here. I had a client of mine. She was 63 years old. And she said one day on a one-to-one coaching call, I do one-to-one coaching with people that really want to get serious about performance and transformation. And she said, Jim, it's very hard for me to maintain relationships. And I said, how do you know that? And she said, because my therapist told me that. And I said, well, how does your therapist know that? And she says, well, because I am the adult child of an alcoholic. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she says, well, that means that I'm unable to sustain healthy relationships. And I said, how old are you? And she told me she was 63. And I said, when's the last time you saw your father? She said, when she was 18. I said, let me get this straight. You've not seen your father for 45 years, right? And she said, yes. And I said, guess what? You're living a story in your head that is 45 years old that's not even true anymore. And she said, oh my God, I'd never realized that all of this is made up in my mind, which, by the way, we're going to actually get into with you a little later on in this program. So I'm asking you right now, whatever age you are, 30, 40, 50, 60, what stories are you still carrying with yourself today about money and religion and politics and wealth and possibility that you learned from your parents and you didn't even know you're still carrying these stories? I do quite well financially, and I'm the opposite of my father. My father, this day and age, this is 2017, my father probably would have made, we were very much working class. My father probably would have made $45,000, $50,000 a year, maybe even a little less than that. But I remember when I was 12, my father looked at me and I was talking about things I wanted to do in life. And my father looked at me and said, you know what? I wasn't born under that $1 million star, and neither were you. So again, I'm asking you, what were you indoctrinated with that no longer serves you? So let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered why getting change out of yourself is so damn hard? If you have, you're pretty much like everyone else. Why you have the positive intention of creating change and you fall right back in your old ruts again. And this is going to complement what you learned up in the subconscious reprogramming program. All right, so what I'm not going to do, and hopefully you know this about me by now, is I'm not the rah-rah motivator. You can do it, you can win, come on, I believe in you. There was some research that I found, and I've not found this anywhere publicly. It's in a hidden textbook from the 1970s, research done at the University of Texas. It was a very, very lengthy research project. And what I'm going to show you here, you will see playing out in your own life, and I bet you're going to recognize it, but you've never heard what I'm going to share with you here. First things first, as human beings, it's hardwired in the brain is we want predictability. Now, this comes from many years ago when we had to forage and hunt for food, and we might have been afraid that we were going to be chewed up by a saber-toothed tiger, but we like predictability. And again, this is hardwired in the brain. So many years ago, the hunter would not leave the cave if they actually could not predict whether or not they were going to come back safely. So if they couldn't have an idea and kind of predict how safe it was going to be to leave the cave, they wouldn't leave. Now, when it comes to us at this point in life, predictability confirms your identity. We want to stay the way that we are because when we stay the way that we can predict what's going to happen tomorrow. So let's say that a woman gets beat in a relationship. Many times you'll see her leave the relationship and go right back into a similar relationship. Why? Because she can predict what's going to happen tomorrow. Now, again, this is hardwired in the brain, and you actually do the same thing without even recognizing it. You actually like predictability. Think about a sales presentation. How comfortable would you be doing a sales presentation if you couldn't rationally predict a range of an outcome? So if every, I'm laughing here, if every sales presentation you went to, you had no idea the outcome, you'd probably develop anxiety about the sales presentation because you would be in fear about you wouldn't know what the outcome was going to be. You, make no mistake, love predictability. And that's why we actually keep our old identities, even if they're not good for us, because we can predict what's going to happen tomorrow. Next is self-verification, and that's along the lines of what we just talked about. So let's say, for example, that a woman believes that she's no good and she deserves to be beat. What she will do is she will get into relationships that will actually verify that for her. So what she will do is she will get into a relationship where she is beat. Why? Because when she's beat, and if she believes that she's a woman who deserves to be beat and to be put in her place, so if she gets beat, that verifies to her, see, I'm getting beat. I told you I deserve to get beat. And the beating actually verifies the identity. And that's what keeps a lot of people trapped. And then here's a big one. Have you ever thought about it and ever noticed when you want to create change in your life? Many times what happens is you become fearful and you get anxious about it. Well, that's called disintegration anxiety. And what that means is, and you might remember from the habit program, is that the reptilian part of the brain does not like to change habits. But what that means is that when we try to create change, we don't know what's going to happen next. And if something in our life changes, what happens is our old identity starts disintegrating, and that puts us into anxiety. So disintegration anxiety, you probably have experienced this in your own life. And what that means is that when we start to create change, we start losing part of our current identity. And because we start losing part of our current identity, who we are at a core level, many times we'll get anxious. Why? For predictability reasons, because we don't know what's going to happen next. But what happens is who we think that we are starts disintegrating. And as that starts disintegrating, we get anxious. So, this is why many times in the past, when you start getting change, maybe you're experiencing a little bit of anxiety. And the reason why is because you're into disintegration anxiety. Okay, so we're going to wrap up this module right here. And as you hear me say on every video, if you have any questions about anything we've covered here, go below and type in your question, and I'll be glad to respond back to you. Make sure you come back and keep watching, because I promise you, as you're going to discover, what you're going to learn in this program is not in the other programs, and it's going to completely change the way that you think, how that you think. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to show you later in this program how to quite literally, very easily, eliminate any fear, any obstacle, anything that holds you back by simply learning to think what I call in a vertical way as opposed to horizontal thinking. Almost everyone, and including you, as you're about to discover later, gets into what I call horizontal thinking. I'm not going to show you different things to think. I'm going to show you a new way to think. Okay, thanks for watching this video, and I'll catch you over on the next one. Bye-bye.